Good evening. Welcome to the December 18th, 2024 School Board Work Session. Will you stand with me to say the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'm going to open the floor to public participation. If you'd like to participate, you're welcome to come to the mic and state your name and address. If you are a student, you never have to state your address. And we will wait just a couple minutes in case someone happens to come in quickly.
I don't know if that works. I don't know if that actually works.
All right, seeing none, we will move on. So tonight we are working on our budget. Tonight is the night for the board to make our final revisions to the budget before it heads over to, before the proposed budget heads over to the budget committee. We will also be discussing the warrant articles that will go on the ballot, and then we will approve minutes tonight. So with that, I'm going to open up the discussion to changes on the budget. Who's going to go first? I went first last year.
All right, I can start. So I'll just start by saying all the presentations that we received, I thought our administrative team has done a really fantastic job, I think, of finding ways to not only decrease costs of things that we just either don't need or are not in need of improving or anything like that, but also finding really truly what we do need. And I don't know, I just felt like nothing was frivolous. Like everything was pretty, cut and dry. And I'll be honest, when I was going through it and listening to the presentations, there wasn't a lot that I saw that I felt could be cut. A lot of the requests for next year, I think, are right in line with our goals. I think a lot of the repairs and new equipment, we have some old, outdated equipment that needs replacing. And so I was trying to justify to myself, like, do we need this? Do we not need this? There was just not a lot. I would say that if I had to pick two things, the two things that I kind of landed on, and I'm not even necessarily in love with the idea of cutting these things, but if I had to pick two things, the two discussion points I would have are the van from food services, which I totally see as such a critical piece of equipment, but I'm open to discussing that. And then the police detail that the high school had requested, which I think police detail at some high school events makes a lot of sense, but I think for every event, I think there's some room there for conversation. So those would be the two things that I came up with, but I had a really hard time, which again, I think comes back to how well prepared this budget was. So that's where I'm at right now.
So I'm going to jump in. I'm with you on the van. I know we need it, but 65,000 miles, and we haven't had any issues with it. We've just done the regular maintenance on it, the brake change, the tire change, oil changes. I mean, I know we can sell it, but I'm also kind of a waste not, want not kind of girl. And that's kind of where I'm at with the van right now. Lori?
So my point on the van is that, first of all, food services, they always come in and they live really very, very frugally. And so they have this, they kind of like save this to be able to buy the van. So I'm with Lori, like maybe we should sell the van that's 65,000, because I think it's critical, though, that they're able to get the food back and forth. And if that van goes, even though it has 65,000 miles on it, and I'm always like conservative with the budget, but I'm like, he asked for it and he never asked for anything. And if we could get a van that we know is, hopefully not a lemon, but a brand new van, and then we did something with the old van, I would personally support that. But I hear what both of you have to say.
Jenna and then Ken.
Well, my thing was,
I get that the whole budget is, it is what it is, but also food service is self-funding, yes? So that includes the van. So so I thought the same thing about the van that you all thought, but then I thought, well, if it's self-funding, and what, am I missing something there?
Well, and that was going to be my question to you, Matt. So when we talk about self-funded, does that mean this van is being paid for by food services?
Yeah, the food service department has over a $300,000 surplus, and pretty soon we're going to have to, by statute, spend that down. And this is a need that Dave has had for a while, and so it is self-funded, and it's not going to affect taxes at all. It's not going to lower your tax rate, and it needs to be spent at some point in time, and Dave thinks that the van is the proper thing, considering there is not a kitchen at Master Cole at Thornton's Ferry and Reed's Ferry Elementary School, and this van shuttles food back and forth.
Yeah, that's what I thought I remembered him saying, is that there was a surplus and that we had to
There's a
use it.
surplus, and we have to use it
So
one
if
way or
we
another.
have to use it, then this seems like the time to buy it, and it doesn't seem like there's any downside to me.
May I just also remind the public that these are funds that cannot be used for other purposes. They
No.
can't be used to buy gym mats or carpeting. Similar to other revolving funds, the funds have to be used expressly for the purpose for which they're collected. So sometimes people think, oh, there's a source of revenue that can be used.
Can't.
It's very limited in nature.
So in that case, I mean, I still think it would be wise to, if we don't have a need for the existing van, to sell it. I mean, that would be a great van for somebody else. But
Right, and if there is a need, just come back and tell
Yeah,
us what
just
the
come back
need
and talk
is,
to us.
because
It
there
may
could
be,
be.
it may be a good van to replace one of the older vans in maintenance.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so just come back
Move
and,
that down the line.
So how
Kind of
would
like
that-
the uniforms going from,
Yeah.
down the line.
right.
It's the same thing. Hand-me-downs. So Tom's looking at the van as a hand-me-down to replace something that he has.
That makes
so there's
sense.
no issue with doing that versus spending the surplus.
No,
Okay.
no.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. So let's talk about the police detail. Every member of the board had concerns and questions about police detail.
Yeah, I get it, and we had a story in the news this week that is a scary thing to think about, and it's always a scary thing to think about. And I understand, why I understand the request. I get it. I haven't seen any evidence that points to a need for every sporting event to have a police officer, which, if we're being honest, considering the proximity from the high school to the police department, one police officer at sporting events, if something violent were to occur, something awful were to occur, there's not a lot that one person's going to do. It might be a deterrent for some folks, but it's a scary thing to think about, but that's not going to change some people's minds to have a police officer there. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And again, if we talk about sporting events, I mean, we have a concert at the high school tonight. Are we talking about putting a police officer? I mean, there are some concerts and events that happen at the high school that have far more than any sporting event, far more people, I should say. So yeah, that's what I'm struggling with.
Jenna.
So I think I agree. I think there's some, I don't know. I can't actually speak to some of these things, but I'm just going to go with maybe like a volleyball game or like a softball game might have far less attendance than, say, a basketball game or a playoff game or certainly a football game or cavalcade of bands or celebration of song, right? I think it should be less sport specific and more event specific. Like you said, the robotics, I think some of these band things where there is I think of cavalcade of bands, whatever. It's an absolutely packed house where there's a lot of people. If there were a police officer there, I think that would be wise, and I think there would be benefits far beyond basic safety and that sort of thing. But I don't know that I see the need for all of it. So I don't think I want to take all that money away. I think I just want, and the hard part is it's hard to know. We really just would. I would think I would have preferred a list of events, and then here's the reasoning why we need these specific events. But maybe we take away part of that money and work on improving, targeting some of those bigger events for coverage this year, and then seeing what we do the following year.
Ken.
And Steve did clarify the other night that this isn't really so much a crowd control issue as much as it's a safety issue in terms of like if something were to occur. So, you know, you have incidents with parents and referees. We've all seen that stuff in the news. So I just want to be clear, like the crowd control issue is an issue in some instances, but at the same time, this is more geared towards like the if something were to happen kind of thing. And just to clarify too, we also heard from our elementary school principals at Thornton's Ferry about requests for police detail, which in that case I actually think makes a lot of sense because that has nothing to do with their buildings. It has everything to do with parking.
Parking in the
and
roadway.
traffic
and
control.
Travel, yeah.
So I actually support that
Yes.
because if you've ever been to Thornton's Ferry on a busy night, it's straight up dangerous to walk, especially when it's dark out in the winter, when they have events. Just having teachers out the road directing traffic is just not a great idea. So
Lori?
So, a couple things. So I appreciate the clarification because, again, like I did talk to Dr. Tim Powers at Pinkerton Academy, who is the largest high school. It's 3 times the size of us. It's Derry, which is a different town than us, and asked them, like, you know, where do you have police officers at sporting events? And so I think it's obviously all of us have the same, you know, worries. You know I know I always did when I was a principal, you know, you never want anything to happen in your school. But I also know that your athletic directors and your advisors, they will know if there's an event and there's someone maybe attending that event that they have some concerns about. And that should come through administration because, you know, you know, we have to be able to say there are going to be incidences that we're not going to know why there's going to be a police officer there, but because of whatever reason, the administration has requested it. So I think there has to be funds. I also think that, you know, right now Merrimack is in a shortage of police officers. They need to increase the amount of money that they're paying police officers, and the town has a shortage. And so just being aware of that, you know, that we definitely need to, on a town side, pay our police officers more so we have enough police officers that they can cover everything. So that's all on that.
And I would say that I'm with Jenna in that I think we can reduce the 54,145 because it isn't crowd control, but statistically, the fewer people in the crowd, the less likely you're going to have an incident of safety arise. And we would have to move whatever we did to another line item because right now it's associated with athletic officials. We'd have to move that to a different line item. Matt could direct us where that would be. Where, say, if we cut it in half and we say these funds are for extra police detail at specific games and high school events.
Yes.
And then, and go from that perspective so that we don't touch the existing police detail budget in the athletic budget that's already from last year and I don't know what part of it is because it just says last year's budget was $86,784. I don't know what part of that was officials and which part of that is MPD. But we can leave that there and then take the request in half and move it to another line item that would cover both athletic administration would need to figure out how to divvy that up for major athletic events and major high school events.
We could just say high school events as needed, because it could be a sport or a music or a robotics or whatever.
We just want to make sure from an audit perspective we have it in the appropriate line. So any other discussion or do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. This is about specifically the police detail at the high school?
Yes.
Cool. So I'll make a motion to decrease the requested amount of, was it 54?
54,145.
Half? By half, drop it down to 20, don't do the math for me, 27, there you go.
Ask the math teacher.
There you go, yeah.
Do I have a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Motion made by Ken, seconded by Jenna. Any further discussion?
Only
Lori?
further discussion would be, I would hope that next year we could have more data on it. And, you know, I know sometimes like I hear, like, why do you have 2 police officers at a boys varsity basketball game? Parents want to know that. And I think sometimes what happens, just, I don't know this for a fact, is that the guy on duty has lunch and he comes in and he talks to the other guy. But what parents are seeing is like, they think we have 2 police officers on duty, right? So, like just more information. Where did we think we needed to have the police? Just give it all to us next year.
And along with that, maybe what are the 5 or 6 largest events? Obviously, and we know football's a largely attended event, but beyond maybe the sporting events, 5 largest sporting events, 5 largest other activities, just so we have that information, to work from when we're talking about this. But I think for this year, I think this is a good first step in that direction.
So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. 500.
Those are my 2.
Lori.
So I want to go back to the discussion that Jenna actually said when we were talking about contracted services and the importance of, if it's possible, like we were talking about, I think, school psychologists, we have in our contracted services, some of the questions were, how many people do we have under contracted services? What is the cost? And, is there a way that we could hire our own people in some of those positions? Because I do agree with everything she said the other night about you build a culture. They know your kids, they know your families. They're not just coming in from some, agency and they're doing their job, which is, like doing the testing or whatever. It's building those relationships. So I do have concerns about that.
Can I just add to that real quick? I was on the New Hampshire website about becoming a qualified examiner, and I'm would like administration to look into maybe a stipend approach so that maybe some of our own people can become qualified examiners for the academic testing. We know for emotional disabilities and OT and speech language, all of those, we need people who specialize in that. But for the academic piece, if we had a couple qualified examiners in-house, we wouldn't have to contract out for the academic testing. So, I can't do that right now, but it's something that I would like us to work towards in addition to the hiring that we talked about.
Yes, and going back to, in that part of the budget too, there were places that there were calculated increases, like in one I calculated 415% increase. So I would hope that, as we go back to the drawing board and we look at that, like if there could just be, just tighten that up somehow, and I think it comes down to contract services. That's what I think the issue is.
So to clarify, you're talking about the school psychologist, and right now what I'm reading is that we currently contract for 5.75 school psychologists, which are required to complete, but we're looking to hire 2 school psychologists, which is, I was saying, I agree with, right? And so you're saying you also agree with that? Is that right? What I'm understanding? Because the amount requested is 0, because it's a wash.
Yes,
Okay.
we're looking to reallocate the money from the contract service line. We're always looking to hire our own people.
Yeah.
It's extraordinarily important.
I just jumped ahead a little bit on the next part where
Yeah.
under that special ed budget, we had some increases that, and I just have the number, so I have to go back and look, but I have a 415% increase, and that was.
Yeah, this, I will say, I think if you look at data from across the region, not only New Hampshire, but the entire region, this is an account, or the contract service accounts in special education have been increasing exponentially over the last 10 years. One of the benefits that a contractor has is they can pay a higher amount. Plus, if a person under contract is finished in one facility, there is plenty of demand in another facility, and so they're not out of work. Very little risk of being cut or reduced in a particular school system. So it's been difficult for us, but we are always advertising to hire our own staff.
So this is contracted services. So this would be
in our budget book on your special ed page 1, and it's 100, 21, 22, 41, 83, 23, 06. And 23, 24, we budgeted 60,000. In 23, 24, we spent 46,058, 63. And now we're budgeting $237,950 in our proposed budget, and it's funds to acquire contracted services for, so again, SEL, it's not special ed, SEL, student wellness, mental health support. So again, like, I feel like that's a huge increase, and I don't understand that.
So that was, if I remember correctly, that was the YES program supporting at-risk.
SES program,
Yeah, at the high school supporting 20 kids. It was adventure lore, tier 1 interventions, guest speakers, assemblies. Those are the notes I wrote under that lesson. That's what those are
But
for.
were those in another line item prior?
Yeah,
Okay,
they were
so,
removed.
okay.
All right.
So, because I know we spent a lot of time on the YES program, and I'm very familiar with the YES program, but when I saw that jump, so contracted service would be the YES program eventually, all right.
So when you look at this year's budget, 24-25, that's where you see that the 237, and we had 3 yes people, and we cut it to 1. Right. And so it was even more, and it was coming out of a different line. And I think you heard Steve say, and many of us are trying to put things in lines where they go. And so it was in some other contracted service line.
Yeah, it was in a very...
that they moved over, and then we ended up cutting 2 of those positions this time last year.
Right, and so what I understand with the YES program is it's kids that are court involved, right? So some. So
Yeah, the YES program, and I mean, Sarah isn't here, but I remember her talking. It is kids that's sort of, they're on track to be in the court system, or they're in the court system. They also can help transport students, do drug testing, connect them with Job Corps, or any number of services. They're not all court placed or court ordered, but they certainly have reason to be considered at risk.
and then the data I would want is how long is a student on the YES program for? Is it, a year? Is it 4 years?
I know that the application process this year has been that if they have a student that has need, that request goes to the student service office. Sarah asked some follow-up questions. Some it is short-term, but some of those students need more longer-term support in any particular area. It's not all special education students, but by the larger population is.
And for our kids that go to Job Corps, how many kids do we know how many kids go to Job Corps?
I don't know. I can ask Sarah and send that information to you to see exactly what YES is doing, who she's working with, and what support they're providing.
Yeah, and the kids that go to Job Corps, they actually live at Job Corps, correct?
I don't know. I just know that was something when we talked about what kind of service can YES provide, and that was one of the things that they had talked about, that they're
Job Corps
authorized.
is free, and I think kids live there.
I think it was more around the transportation, that if they are trying to get students involved in employment type activities.
Okay, so it wouldn't be Job Corps, it'd be getting them jobs.
I think
Because
so.
Job Corps is where they go and they live there, and then they get certain skills.
That's not what's happening, because these are
Okay.
students that are at
All right,
Merrimack
so
High School.
It's not really, they're getting jobs and they're going to okay.
But I will get more clarification about that. I know that was something that we had 2 marks last year. One of the marks was transporting students, but because we only have 1 of them this year, I can get more specifics about what they're actually doing and how many students.
So, I'll send Sarah an email about that line, just because I imagine a budget committee might ask the same question. Why did it jump? Because and I'm sure in last year's budget book, it probably lists the lines that those came from into that line. So I'll be happy to send her an email just to let her know that question might come up, and it can be answered, because we held the line to that this year, to the same budget. So, Ken, did you have your hand up a moment ago?
I did, and then it was answered and
Okay.
discussed. So
So, I still, the big jump from 298, 630 to 621 on, again, the contracted services for elementary, I have no doubt we need them. That's not in question. And I had a feeling when she answered the question that we were behind on the triennials. That didn't surprise me. COVID messed up everybody's cycle for those kinds of things. But when I asked her specifically about white birch, I felt like it's not that they weren't good reasons. They were good reasons, but they were a lot of convenience reasons for switching. And so I know that we're on track to be at that same amount this year that wasn't even budgeted. Just an encouragement to keep looking for better contracted services. Maybe it may not be as convenient, but the most efficient use of those funds for the services that we need. I'd like to see us just keep pursuing. And I know we have to do contracts early. I know they want, us to commit before the budget even passes. So we're not even talking for this next budget season, but maybe for the next budget season.
Lori, just for clarification, is that
Yes.
page 10?
That I'm talking about, or that I'm
Yes.
gonna email Sarah about, or the contracted service?
The contracted service? Is it PTOT speech?
No, I'm talking about the psychological testing at elementary, page 12. Top of
Thank you.
page 12, sorry. All right. Anything else that you want to cover in the budget? We'll let Naomi go.
You go ahead. I don't want to hog you. I have plenty more to say.
This was hard because I feel like the asks were really small this year. A lot of the increases in this budget were things that the voters have already approved, like the salary increases for the teachers and the support staff, which we're very grateful for, and they were things like our health insurance going up. And so it was challenging looking at this number and going, wow, that's a lot more than last year, and also going, but I really don't see a lot of wiggle room in here. That being said, I asked this when maintenance was here, and I want to be very clear that I think our maintenance department does a fantastic job. There are a lot of problems that we don't have because our maintenance department is so proactive and so good at keeping things in repair and the ship running the way it should. And I asked the question in the meeting about the utilities prices, and I called out electricity. What I saw it across all of the utilities is that and I went back and looked for electricity, but I didn't go back and look for the other ones because I didn't have time. It feels like to me, unless Matt, you tell me definitively that no, our delivery costs are going to go up like X percent. It looks like there might be some wiggle room there to
We are
shave a
not
little bit
sure
off.
about the public utility, the PUC
Yeah.
in Concord, and the delivery charges. I remember making a statement that you can be gone from your house from 6 months, have nothing plugged in, and you're going to get a delivery charge.
Right.
And the truck doesn't go by your house delivering natural gas or electricity, so you're going, why do I have the delivery charge? But yeah, it more than likely is going to go up. We have been the benefit of bidding this out every year, and we're in a long-term deal. It's going to take us well into 2027. So the actual supply rates are going to be stable, but it's all in the delivery charges. And so we're just trying to be a little conservative there.
And my question, I guess, is this one of those ones that if we miscalculate on the delivery charges, do the auditors get cranky? Does it affect our bond rating? Are there any long-term consequences there if we were to be a little more conservative?
Sometimes the maintenance budgets, it's not, it doesn't give me as much, let's see, of a emerging ulcer as the special ed budget does. The special ed budget from people in my area, line of work, is it's very, very, very concerning because in a heartbeat, you get 5 kids, $500,000 each placement moving in. and all of a sudden you get $2.5 million. That happens.
Well, and there are real consequences
And there
for
are
being
real you
under
have-
budget in that, or I forget the whatever term, but yeah, there
Yeah.
are bad consequences if
Bad
that
consequences. And you have to worry about, special ed maintenance of effort. I have to have a special ed budget that's more than next year than this year right here. Or the DOE is going to say, you're not making maintenance of effort, so therefore we're going to take your IDEA grant away. And they would just love to do that, and that's $1 million, right?
Yeah.
But the maintenance budget is another one. Well, we're not really sure what the heck is going to happen. We try and plan for everything. But, a couple of years ago, some of the boilers went at the new middle school, I mean, my gosh, it's only 20 years old, right? We have a boiler right now in central office, right, Bill? That's looking at around a $25,000 repair bill if we choose to. Right now it's running okay, it's been patched, but there are a lot of unknowns that can happen with maintenance. We had a water main break right where the concession stand was in the back of the high school. That all of a sudden, Mike Alvasis and company had to come in and fill it and backfill everything and let everything settle, and that took us a week to do. There's lots of things that you try and plan as far as prevention goes, and then there's a lot of things that just happens, especially when you're dealing with 700,000 square feet of buildings that range from 1948 to 2004.
And I'm wondering, with now we've got the ability to retain that surplus for possibly covering some of those emergencies. Is it possible? Is there any wiggle room in those utility lines? Because there's a lot of utility lines, and could we reduce them by every line by a little bit and save a?
If we lose the road that goes down behind the high school to the old the old varsity girls softball field that we're now using the American Legion, that's an emergency. Failing to budget for utilities, that's not an emergency. So that goes counter to what the intent of the Warren article was. It was for emergency.
Oh, I didn't mean using that money. I meant you were talking about the boiler that's patched and that kind of thing. I meant that would be what we would be using that money for.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the legality of it, I guess. What are the consequences if, we're $1,000, we underestimate by $1,000 for our electric bill?
If you, it's kind of like things building, the perfect storm. You get those 5 placements from SPED, you're up $2.5 million. You get this going on. You get some more unfunded mandates from the state, You get a certain level of just things happening that you hadn't planned for. And now you have the potential to go over budget on your bottom line. However, there is probably, if you wanted to look at it and do some minor cuts in those areas, I think we can do that.
I was thinking very minor. I was
That's fine.
thinking
If you're
few
thinking
minor
of
cuts.
cutting
to,
it in half,
no.
that's one story.
If
you're thinking of shaving it a little bit,
yes, that's
we're
what I'm
fine with
proposing.
that. Okay.
A very, very modest, because I looked at the actuals for the last 3 years,
Yeah.
and like I said, I don't know what the delivery charges are going to be, and you obviously don't either.
We don't
but you
either.
have more of you'll be able to make that educated guess better than I will.
Yeah.
But I was definitely seeing that. Looking just at the data that I have for the last 3 years, I felt like, $1,000 here, $1,000 there,
Yeah.
and that might add up to a fair bit.
Let's
off
say it
the bottom
adds
line.
up to $20,000-$30,000.
Exactly,
Let's
exactly.
let's do that.
So
Let's
what lines
support
are you
that.
talking about? Let's break them down.
I would actually probably prefer to leave the specifics of it up to Matt.
Okay.
You want to give me and Tom a bottom line to cut, and then we could apportion it as we see
Yeah,
fit?
because that way it's done appropriately and
Naomi, may I ask, are you referring to all utilities or just electricity? Or
electricity was the one that
natural gas,
stood
or-
out to me, but it's
Okay.
it's okay with me if it sort of, because I did see a couple of other ones that I didn't go back and do the history of that last year, or for 22, 23, that's the one, or no, 23, 24 is the one we have actuals for in this book.
Yeah.
that looked like there was wiggle room. But again, I don't have the history, so I don't know if like it was a unnaturally low year out of the last 5
Yeah.
or something. And that's where I, like I said, as I would be hesitant to just make a broad statement of let's cut whatever from it, but it did seem like you
There
might
was
be able
one
to
in there
find
for
some room.
natural gas where I actually called up Liberty Utilities and said, "Are you kidding me?"
Right.
I didn't want to make the phone call, but it looked too good to be true. But you know, obviously it kind of was. So if you want to just say electricity or utilities as a whole,
Yeah.
let us massage that for you
Exactly.
guys. That would be fine.
So what would your motion be?
I move that we direct administration to look at the utilities lines in the maintenance budget, electricity, potentially natural gas, and any others that they feel are appropriate, and find $30,000 of cuts there.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
I was gonna say, if you want to see my numbers right here, I've got numbers.
Okay, discussion.
Yeah. It makes me nervous too.
Yeah, that's me too.
Yeah.
So after being on planning and building, I think for 20 years now, you know, there's been all kinds of studies and watching through the years, different things that happened with the school district. I would be nervous to cut there. We give the money back if it's too much. So that's just me. Like, I know usually I'm like, okay, like we can cut that. I'm like, I'm nervous.
Same.
And I can see Naomi's numbers. She has the last couple of years. Yeah, and so I
Don't feel bad. You did
much
good. I
respect
think
for the
it's good.
homework, absolutely. So I can see that,
Yes.
but I just come back to like what happens if. And
Right.
So like that's
Right.
where I'm always at. So
I guess there's a part of me that thinks like, what if a month from now New England Weather is telling us it's going to be
Everything
5
goes
degrees, you know, and it's going to be minus 20 every night. Now we just had all of our oil and natural gas just skyrocket in usage, and
There's usage, because we pay a per unit cost.
Right.
It's like I think we pay for electric 9.5 cents a kilowatt.
yeah.
Right,
So
which is
imagine if
good.
we, you know, had a
But you're
20%
using more
increase
of
in our
it.
kilowatt,
Yeah.
then, you know, or our therms or those kinds of things. then-
Therms, yes, very good.
Yeah, I read the Liberty utility bill.
I
get it.
know, yes. I was very happy to hear that.
You know, may I say also, these are accounts that are oftentimes influenced by global instability
That's
and,
a fact.
and potential severe market fluctuations. So I can understand a small amount. We just want to be very careful. And
I guess
try to
that's my
reduce it.
follow up is do the folks who look at this stuff, Matt, all you know,
All the time.
do you feel like we can still do what we need to do if we, as you say, massage them a little bit? Because that's I think we're all a little nervous about.
For a $30,000 reduction in the budget, I'm fairly confident that we could take care of that.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor of having administration work on the utility costs for a reduction in the budget of $30,000, say aye. All those opposed? 140.
That's the way it works. It's awesome.
Okay, Lori, you're up.
Okay, so I have a question on the administrative assistants, 3 administrative assistants, and for me, again, looking at the whole picture, I really would like to have more information. You know, we have special ed coordinators at our schools. We have a special ed director. We have 504 coordinators. So to come in and say we need 3. It seems like, like usually, when you're budgeting, you say, all right, so this year we're going to ask for 1, and then if we'll see how that goes, then we might need more. But to come in and say we need 3, I didn't feel like we need 3.
But we will be glad to provide you with more specific information. I mean, this is an area that I'm going to be very honest with you. Sometimes you don't do a good job at things, and this is an area where we need to do a better job in terms of regulatory compliance, record keeping, communication, transitioning of information, but we will provide you with that more specific information.
Well, and my understanding too is we were centralizing the 504 coordination,
Yes.
which I, work in an elementary building and watching the guidance counselor or the school counselor try to balance the 504 coordination with the actual working with students, that 504 coordination takes so much of that person's time that it takes them away from working with and giving support to students and to teachers. So I am absolutely in favor, certainly, of that being able to be handled by an administrative assistant as opposed to a school counselor. In addition, we need to improve our compliance, I guess is maybe the best way to say that. And that is not something we want to mess around with. I think it's a fair question to say, do we need 3? Could we do 2? And then, but I definitely am in favor of the 504 coordination. And I think a fair question to ask is, does that need to be a full-time position? Is there a possibility of doing it at part-time, which is less cost? Could that person, because if that's the only thing they're doing, could it be a part? And the answer could be no. I don't know the answer to that question. But I'm open to discussing, not there
I get
being
it.
3, but I think that there are some concerns, and I think we all have concerns about compliance and making sure that, we don't want to be the town that is always coming or being cited for compliance issues. We want to be the town that everybody knows you can trust the way they do things in Merrimack because they have got it locked in.
So I agree. And, working in different school districts, that guidance handled 504 compliance and then lining up 504 compliance. And then, the way in Nashua, like the 504 compliance would be on people's caseloads. So the guidance counselor would know the 504 and then would speak to the teacher, especially in high school, because what happens is these kids, they have a semester class and they have another semester class, and making sure when a student is going from, say, pottery 1 to pottery 2, that the teacher knows that we're in compliance, here's the 504. That kind of naturally does go with guidance. I don't really want an administrator assistant do anything other than collect the information and help support the person, because the actual person who we hire to be the director of 504 should be doing that. And I think we've had that person on staff for 2 years now, right? Is that correct? Yeah.
It's, the 504 has been fairly distributed, and what we're trying to do is centralize it right now. And there's where in each individual school, we do need the administrative assistance for the record keeping, for the regulatory compliance. Quite honestly, we're trying to prevent the Department of Education from taking up residency in here because of our record keeping that needs to improve in the area of 504.
Ken?
Well, and I agree with a lot of what Jenna said in terms of, and what everyone's saying about compliance and, our special ed department particularly. Like, there's many times where, they're just staying above water, because there's just the amount of paperwork that's involved with that, and organization and record keeping is just, it's far more than any other department. So I do think it's interesting to think about like a part-time situation. I hadn't considered that. And I'm not saying maybe all 3, but, maybe like 2.5 or something like, it's just an interesting idea that I hadn't considered.
Well, we could do like 2.5 FTEs,
Yeah.
or something like that. The concern that I have about full-time and part-time in general is these are typically are positions that never go away. So once we get everything in compliance and we're up to date and everything's running like clockwork, and we don't need 3 administrative assistants anymore, are we in a position where we're stuck
Yeah.
continuing because, we don't just generally lay off people like that?
Well, and part-time too is typically harder to get consistent employees. Like
It
it's
is.
going to be a bit of a revolving door. So that would
We'll
be tricky.
give
to-
you more information. The people who have been working in that capacity have been working very hard. But from an organizational perspective, we've been kind of duct taping this together, and we need to address it more completely.
The reason I mentioned part-time is because I was a stay-at-home mom for 20-something years, but a certified teacher. And the reason I never taught is because I couldn't do the full-time thing. The job I have now is part-time. I work 9 to 2:30, right? And they don't offer me benefits, and I make, less, but
It helps.
as an administrative assistant position, you ask for 9 to 2:30, you could get somebody who would love to be an administrative assistant and mother's hours, right? Their
Yes.
kids are in school.
Yes, get 'em in
And
school.
so we can have a win-win there. Now, we could be proven wrong and maybe not find somebody to hire, but I think there's a lot of, in this economy, moms in particular who have those skills that would be willing to do that, especially if they're on their kids' school schedule. If you make it a school year schedule, maybe
Exactly.
it's, I don't know how that works with the contract or whatever, but I wonder if we could get creative to meet our need while also not costing the district as much money. My position existed in multiple buildings in my district. And my principal was the only one who said, hey, how about if we just make this person part-time? All of those other positions were cut and mine was kept. Why? Because I was affordable, right? And so maybe we can do something like that here.
I agree.
And I could see that once we got everything in tip-top shape, those part-time positions remaining, because there would always be part-time work to do.
We'll bring back some recommendations, or a recommendation to you. What I want to make sure of is whatever we present to you represents doing something correctly and thoroughly.
Can I ask a question? Only because tonight's the night we're finalizing that. How do we do that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Because
tonight.
we're voting on the budget that's going to the budget committee.
Right.
So do we have to kind of make that decision now?
Well, they can make a modification based on modifications based on school board input or whatever. If we could, when we do the vote, I think we could, that's a good point, Jenna, just say, based on discussion, though, there might be some modifications.
Absolutely do that. Okay, you had your hand up, sorry.
Okay,
Lori.
so, this goes back to, our meeting on Monday. So Finn was talking about a teacher who was actually giving up their prep to teach. And so, we don't have a budget line, but I think like a teacher who is teaching like an independent study, or, in the gifted and talented line, if we had like $1, then as we go through and we discuss this in greater depth, and we get, the depth of knowledge we need to know, how would this process work? Because I do like the idea that there are so many talented teachers that could teach something outside or within their own, like maybe, like for example, someone came to him and said, I can't take advanced guitar because it's, E period, but if you
Has
could,
literally happened to me.
yeah, sorry, but if you could teach me advanced guitar, I would love for someplace in our budget under gifted and talented or wherever, that we're able to say, yes, we have a stipend, this is the process, and we're not there yet, but, to have that budget line someplace to do it, I think it really helps our schools to be more creative. And if we don't have that dollar, it goes away.
And we have a lot of stipends already that, are so important. And I think outside of because you're right, the ELO stipend is not intended to be daily or weekly instruction.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that.
Yeah, so it does need to have kind of its own area. And it would have to be approved by administration, approved by Steve, all of those things. There would have to be an approval process by administration to grant that stipend. But I do think we should have something along those lines. Academic instruction stipend or.
So because we can move money at certain places or put money in there, I don't care, but, and then as we develop it, it's there.
Does it belong somewhere within Harley Hall's scope, even though technically it's not an ELO? Is it I mean, just thinking outside the box. I have
Yeah.
no idea where it belongs.
I was also surprised because we actually have 3 different ways that teachers can get paid. We have the 1/5 that was part of the collective bargaining unit. So when Finn explained, I also was surprised. The second is the independent study, and the third is the new SLP. So I guess I just need some more information specifically about what Mr. Fliss is doing and the level of instruction that he's providing, because if he's actually teaching an additional course, he should be compensated differently than if he's overseeing an ELO or an independent study. So we do have lines and mechanisms to do it. That was a really unexpected. To be honest, I didn't know that he was meeting with Mr. Fliss every day.
Well, and you know what? I would wonder if Mr. Fliss even knows he can be paid for that. He
Right.
is
No, that's
probably
exactly right.
like an awesome teacher. Any awesome teacher is like, these kids want to learn. I have a study. Amazing. Match made in heaven. Let's do it. Imagine, Merry Christmas, Mr. Fliss. Maybe you can get paid for that. You know what I mean?
I think that he knows that if he does an ELO or an independent study through Harley, your earlier, and he's the one that's overseeing it. I needed some additional information from Monday, and I wasn't able to get it yesterday. I was homesick, and I think I need to know from Rich, like, why didn't the class run? Because if a class doesn't run, sometimes they say to juniors, we'll run it again next year. You know, they don't try to say, but for seniors, there's no other chance for them. So I think we just need a little bit more information. And if that ELO is really instruction, we should be paying them either through the 1/5, or they can apply for an SLP, or we should increase, as Finn suggested, for all of you to consider increasing those stipends.
So I just have a question on ELOs too. So, if a student at Merrimack High School is going to take an ELO and say they're going to take advanced guitar for an ELO, then the advanced guitar teacher would get the stipend for the ELO, and would the music teacher be the person who's assessing and grading the ELO? Is that correct?
I think they come up with a proposal that goes to Harley, and then Harley has to decide what are the competencies. It's my understanding that an ELO, though, is not additional instruction. And I think that was what the disconnect. What they're talking about there is that Mr. Fliss used to teach this course. There's a whole curriculum that goes along with it. It didn't run, and that's why they were doing it. You know, an ELO is supposed to be, what does the student want to learn? And then that advisor, who in this case I don't know that we would say advanced guitar didn't run, so can Mr. Martin teach it to me during his study, because that's different than I want to learn about the guitar, and here's the 3 competencies that I want to meet. And then I meet with Mr. Martin maybe at the beginning to set my plan, maybe once more to do a check-in, and then final to do my presentation. That was how Harley has explained, how the ELOs would run, not that Mr. Martin is going to teach that class specifically to that student.
No, I get it. So,
Yeah.
but would Mr. Martin be the one that's assessing the competencies to make
That's
sure?
my understanding, is that the mentor
the teacher,
is
the
matched.
mentor who is going to be, okay, that's all that was my
And I guess that it's a good question, because sometimes students are getting ELOs for things outside of school.
Right.
And so I wonder if Harley, as a certified teacher, is the person that looks at the competencies in conjunction with that person. But I know they try to match the person who has the expertise as the person that's doing the assessment.
Okay.
So who am I teaching guitar to? Yeah.
Giving you a stipend.
Yeah, where's my stipend?
Just got you a stipend.
All right, are there any other changes that we want to make to the budget? So according to my math, we are talking about reducing the proposed budget by $57,072.50. Oh, yours did fail. Sorry. You're right. See, I've added it in. We're reducing the budget by $27,072.50. With the caveat that there might be some changes regarding the 3 administrative assistants, whether that's full-time positions or part-time positions without benefits, that all affects the budget, or hybrid.
It's not going to be like huge dollar amounts.
No.
though, in terms of the overall budget.
No.
It could be because
For
of benefits,
benefits.
though. If you take it and you move to part-time, the you know, so you see some of these positions that are listed and it's like $100,000. That's not this one probably, but you're talking about, you see next to it, it says salary and benefits. You get rid of the and benefits part and you are saving the district a lot of money.
And in this case, it didn't have the benefits listed. It's just the salary for those three.
Oh, okay.
Can you just read that number again one more time?
Yes.
Yeah.
$27,072.50. You rounded up. I was being the mathematician and being absolutely precise.
Department of Rev chops the pennies off anyway, so.
Any other comments by the board?
I just have a question. And I realize that this question absolutely should have been asked during one of the things, but I only just realized it tonight for some reason. So we have in the budget the payment for like for football uniforms. Does the district provide the uniforms for all sports, or does the booster club? Because when I remember in soccer, the soccer uniforms were paid for by the booster club, not, my understanding, by the school. And yet we pay for them for football. So I'm curious how that works.
So I can tell you because I coached here forever. So, so what happens is there's a uniform recycling program. So like for example, I think sometimes parents sometimes in the booster clubs do come in and buy new uniforms because, like for say Spirit, like right, all of a sudden they want something different, and you got like, it's like 7 years before you get new uniforms. And so those uniforms in 7 years, because they get passed from kid to kid, and someone has ketchup on their uniform, or, you know, don't give me 13 because, you know, whatever, you know, so so there's a cycle. And then sometimes in that cycle, booster clubs will buy them. So our booster club, when I was the varsity soccer coach, always bought socks and, you know, they helped with certain things to support the kids. Shorts, socks and shorts is what they bought. But we always had, the school bought the varsity tops and the JV, and then we would give the varsity tops, those poor things, to the JV kids that would give them to the freshman kids. So if you're playing freshman sports in Merrimack, good luck, because the uniforms are literally like 20 years
It's kind of like when we were talking about the food service van, how it could be realized.
Right,
I mean,
right.
they're-
So that's what happens. So there's a cycle, and that's why that's a really good question, because the other question I get a lot from people, and it has to do with how does athletic departments do their budgets? And, you know, for example, like wrestling, there's not a lot of cost to wrestling. So when you look at like how much for wrestling, but then you look at how much, you know, like say ski team was, or I guess swimming wouldn't be that expensive either. But, you know, like there's sports that are more expensive and sports that are less expensive. One of the things that I really liked as a coach when I was at Merrimack is we had to present a budget to the athletic director, what our needs were, and then he would come back and say, you're not getting that this year, you're not getting that this year, or yes, you're getting it. So it was like every few years you would be able to hit payday and get everything that you would want, but most of the time, just like what we're doing now, you know, you didn't get everything you wanted. It wasn't Christmas every year. And, you know, so that gave the coaches also a way to be advocates for their programs.
Well, the reason I ask is because there's just a lot for football, right? And this is okay, so don't come at me, football people. But I'm just saying that it stands out because every year we've got a new request. Like often we have new requests, like $22,000 for the blue uniforms this year, because they're beyond cleaning and repair. They were bought in 2019. The white ones were replaced just last year. But I'm not seeing anything for. So this is not me coming at football. This is me saying, so football, it's in there, but I'm not seeing, and maybe I'm just missing it and it's somewhere I don't know, but I'm not seeing.
Girls soccer.
I saw like soccer or
Boys soccer.
or basketball or any like
But that's-
where are the uniforms for them, and just making sure that they're in there. I'm not saying we take anything out right now. I just want to make sure that equity wise. That it's not, we're buying the football jerseys whenever they need to be, but we're having the booster clubs do them for all other sports. If if we're doing it for football, we should be doing it for all of them, and the booster clubs can then do whatever the booster clubs do. Just a thought for, again, down the road, not
Would
this
you,
budget.
as a board, would you like some additional information from Adam
I would love that.
on uniform replacement and?
Yeah.
And I
okay.
think one of the things we'd like for next year, because we used to have it, is have the athletic director make his
Yes,
own
we will
presentation
do that.
to the
Right,
board.
'cause then you get to ask them those questions.
Correct.
You know, like, so when, because I know like that, oh,
Sorry, she's gonna yell at me. I know that's a really good question, but what is the cycle, you know, and trust me, by the end, those uniforms are pretty old. I do know with football, it's a lot of cost for the helmets that they have to recondition those helmets for safety every year, and that's a major cost for football for every 88 schools in the state of New Hampshire that have football.
Yeah. And again, I'm not looking to take anything from anyone. I'm just looking to make sure we don't have, say, and I choose soccer because that's what I was involved in, but like the soccer team is the booster club is providing all of their uniforms while we're providing everything for football, right? Or the swim team, small as they are, the whatever 10 of them that there are, I think the booster club provided the pants that they travel in, the shirts that they travel in. The school provided their bathing suit. You know what I mean? So like I as a parent paid a lot of money for the jacket he has to wear or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So I think it would be helpful if the athletic director, because it's almost like $400,000 out of the budget in the high school. So I'd love to be able to ask questions, because I have actually a lot of questions every year about the specifics of that. And that was just the one that jumped out at me tonight for some reason. I happened to just turn to the right page is actually what happened.
I just want to make one more point on that too, just for clarity. I think when we get that information, we'll find that most likely the number one, as far as they don't make cuts, and they have a freshman team, they have a JV team, and they have a varsity team. So I think we have the highest level of participation too, which is another reason in that sport where something like soccer, by the NHIAA, you're only allowed to have, it's either 18 or 20, I think 18 kids, so you have to cut. Where football, there are no cuts. So every kid who wants to play football can play football. But in soccer, there are, from the NHIAA, there's, you can't even carry one more kid. It's like, this is what it is.
And again, this is not about taking away from football. We very, very robustly support our football program with safety and whatever. Right. But are we doing the same thing for, say, hockey? Are they getting the safety pads and the equipment replaced I don't think we're skimping on safety. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that that's across the board. And while we're talking about it, marching band. When's the last time those uniforms were replaced? Do those uniforms need to be replacing? Is there a replacement schedule there? Just, these are the things I think about when I'm talking about equity. One of the things I brought up last year was sports versus the arts, sports versus theater. So thrilled to see the co-curriculars and things like theater coming back at Merrimack High School and being actually funded. Big deal. Loved seeing that this year. But I know Ken will chime in and say we want to make sure that our marching band looks as good as our football team.
Of
Can I
course,
say
they look
something
great.
about the uniforms?
And I'm going to say this goes way back to probably one of my first years as a first-year teacher, second-year teacher, deliberative session. But it was before, it was when you voted right in deliberative session. We were there till after midnight over band uniforms. I'm not kidding you. They passed, but it was hours of the Merrimack public deciding on band uniform. I'll never forget it.
Well, years ago when we had a full budget committee that handled town, police, fire, highway, as opposed to the school district budget committee, which just handles the school district, there was a petition warrant article by Pat Cunningham brought forward to replace the band uniforms. And all the band members came into that meeting. It was up on the other room where the courthouse used to be, right? and they all marched in, and it was a petition warrant article, and that's how they got the uniforms. That's got to be 15 some odd years ago. I know they're not using the same pants. Those things are gone, right? But I believe they still have the same jackets, and they've got to be over 15 years old.
And those things have to be dry cleaned. You can't wash them in the washing machine. It's an expensive project. And I remember years ago, I think it was Concord, was having this same fight with the band uniforms, and the band kids stopped wearing uniforms. They showed up in street clothes to football games, and that changed a lot of people's attitudes real fast. Yeah.
We had a lot of band kids in that little courthouse room up there, you know. I mean, it was quite something, you know.
I want to make one more comment before we finalize the budget, move on to warrant articles. My first year on the board, there was $0 for co-curriculars. I have supported every year the co-curricular budget. However, our previous assistant superintendent discussed looking for outside funds for co-curriculars, and to date, that has not happened. I am in favor of this year's increases, and some of them are pretty high at the elementary level because, you know, kids not going home, I think, is a good thing. I think being involved is a good thing. But next year, I want to see every one of the building principals have an initiative to look for more volunteers. Parents contact me all the time. How can I volunteer? Well, you got a skill. Can you do, you know, Frisbee golf? Let's have a Frisbee golf co-curricular, and they volunteer their time. Our teachers absolutely deserve a stipend if they're staying after school and running a co-curricular, but I think we need to start looking at the expenses of that and looking for more creative ways to partner with our community, because we have amazing people in this community who have a wealth of talent and experience to come and volunteer for some of those co-curricular activities. And yes, they have to be volunteers, and yes, they have to be background checked, and we have the safeguards in place for that. But I'd like to see us look for some cost-effective ways to provide co-curriculars without increasing the budget next year. Lori.
So what I would say to that is I agree. But I think it would have to come through central office. Like, these are, like, we're looking for someone for chess, because for a principal to be able to put something out and then try to, you know, get that person, you know, I think we should start it right in July. These are, you know, when we do our goals meeting, these are the areas that we could bring somebody in. And I think like chess would be a great one, because there's retired people that love chess and they could come in and run the chess club, you know. But I think it should be like on our central office website. The Upper L is looking for someone to volunteer for chess, and
I think
see
it
if we
needs
get
to
somebody.
be-
We might not get anybody, but you might, because
Yes.
the hours, you know. But again, there are people that probably would do it.
I think it needs to be somewhat student-driven, though. Like, our middle school principal did a great job of putting out a survey, and the students saying these are the things we're interested in. That's what should drive who we're looking for. What do the students want to do? What are they interested in doing? And then that's what first of all, the first communication should be with parents, because parents are our first line of partnership. And then expand that out on our website and things like that. These are the desires of the students of Merrimack. These are the things they're interested in, and these are the types of things we're looking for. And we probably have students very interested in chess. All of my kids love chess, so it's a good example. All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to accept the budget with the reduction of $27,072.50.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second? Motion made by Ken, seconded by Jenna. Any further discussion? Can you give us the bottom line on that?
Yeah, I have 96, 823, 198 even.
Say that again.
96, 823, 198.
All those in favor say aye. 500.
If I could have a moment, I just want to talk to the default budget, just to give you an idea, because that's in the warrant article. I know we're going to cover the whole thing, but I just want to take the time. The default budget is like $1 million less than the budget we're asking for right now. That equates to 50 cents on the tax rate, which is $100 less than voting in the budget that you guys just proposed, or let me use the better word, request that the budget committee look at right now. And the default budget in and of itself, there seems to be some confusion on how that's arrived at. So I want to quote right from the RSAs. I was around when this RSA was written. Some of these words are mine. RSA colon 4013. Default budget as used in this subsection means the amount of the same appropriation as contained in the operating budget authorized for the previous year. So you take last year's budget that has been passed, reduced and increased as the case may be by debt service, contracts, other obligations previously incurred or mandated by law, and reduced by one-time expenditures, right? Not likely to recur in subsequent budgets. So like if we were to buy Bill an engine for his car, because Bill doesn't like new cars, he likes new engines in his car, right? I know you were. So that would be something I would look at as a one-time expense, and I would take that out. I also look at warrant articles as one-time expenses also, because they're separate from the operating budget. So when I'm doing the calculation on the default budget, I start off, because certain people are expecting the default budget to go down, and if it's based upon the budget that we're just talking about that's passing, that includes health insurance increase and wage increase and utilities increase and special ed increases, I don't see a trend of that going down unless somebody makes a motion to cut the budget by $5 or $6 million. Then that would become the new lower benchmark that we'd all have to play to. But you have the approved budget from last year, which is the $93,298,000, right? I put in the teacher contracted salaries. I put in the support staff contracted salaries. Both of those were around $1 million, but I didn't take the entire $1 million on each of them because we had a shift in the amount of staff hired. So if we had lower staff coming in, senior staff leaving, I used those new people coming in as the basis of what the increase is. There are some people who could say, well, the warrant article said it was $1 million. I don't care if it's different people. You stick $1 million. I don't do that. I put the lower amount in to make things, in my mind, fair that I can justify. We have the health insurance increase, the dental insurance increase. It's pretty simple. Workers' comp increase. I took out the roof. We had a roof last year, $797,000 at JMU's and MES. I took that out of the default budget. We have our transportation contract, and then, certain insurances that we have to carry by law. It's really kind of a simple formula. And, today I gave the budget committee the 400 line item detail that I use to calculate the default budget for both 23-24 and for 24-25 and 25-26. They wanted to see the detail. Now, I just want to make this clear. The default budget is the purview of the school board only. The budget committee has no authority over the default budget. The default budget cannot be changed at deliberative session. That is in the law. You go through RSA 40:13. It's this body that creates it. It can't be changed by the budget committee, and it can't be changed at deliberative session. It's a safeguard, in case things go sideways in a bad way. So I just wanted to get that out there and just have a little conversation about what it is and what it isn't. There's no mystery to this. It's as black and white can be. So
Thank you, Matt.
thank you very much.
So, because Ken is on the clock for us tonight,
Oh, yes,
there is an
sorry.
issue that I want, before we go over the rest of the warrant articles, if you will notice in your packet, there is a warrant article we have discussed quite a bit, an issue we've discussed that is not on there. Part of the reason is it's related to the SAU building. We have not had a formal presentation by Building and Planning, but all of us have watched the meetings. And at their last meeting, they voted to recommend the newest proposal for an SAU building. Now, we know the needs. Our buildings are not ADA compliant. They are not safe. They are out of fire code, and they are really old. And they only house about half, maybe a third of the number of people we need actually working together. We need a solution. That being said, and the Planning and Building Committee has done great work. They've spent their entire summer and fall going back and looking at all the options. The reason, as the chair, I did not have that in this article is, one, we haven't heard their presentation, but two, we need to have a discussion because I'm very, very concerned about putting a warrant article on the ballot about that. Our operating budget is critical for passing for so many reasons. The most important being it's what we need to provide the best education for the best tax dollar for our students. So I want to just have a discussion on your thoughts, what you're thinking about the SAU building and this year's ballot.
And I'll go first because I have to leave soon. So this is a tough pill to swallow because of what we went through last year and what really has been the work of our district administration and planning and building committee for going on 20-something years. And as Lori said, we know this is an important piece that we're missing right now. I completely agree with what you just said in terms of the operating budget is number one. And if anything could possibly get in the way of that not being in favor of our voters, then I think that we do need to have a serious conversation about priorities. And I think our constituents in this town spoke pretty loudly last year about how they felt about it. I do think there is gaining support. I do think there's a lot of work that we can do to gain support. The more and more folks that kind of learn more about what we have going on in the SAU buildings. We heard it the other night. We heard public comment. So I think there is support that is growing. But I think taking a snapshot right now at where we are, where our taxes are, you read in the news every day, towns are going to war with Concord about public school funding. So we are in a very kind of critical time when it comes to budgets. And so I think it's just a tough pill to swallow, but I see why we're having that conversation.
Yes, Naomi.
My biggest concern is that we've been here before, where it was on the ballot one year and it failed, and then it stagnated for 10 years. And we cannot let that happen again. For one thing, I don't think those buildings will last that long. Literally. Also, we're continuing to throw money down that drain, keeping them running. So it's really hard because, like I said, I don't want to sit back on our heels and do nothing.
Well, and especially after the work and the meetings and the discussion that we had.
Yes, and doing nothing's not an option for even the shorter term, not necessarily this year, but yeah, doing nothing is not an option.
Right,
I agree with that.
We're like, we always knew that this was a project that was going to take some momentum, and we're starting to build that momentum, like Ken said, and I have concerns that we'll stall the momentum. So,
Lori.
So I hear everything that people are saying. Being a member of the Planning and Building Committee and seeing the work that they've done through all those years and seeing what those buildings are like. And for me, it's you know, not only are we not ADA compliant, I have huge safety concerns. You know, as a 43-year educator, it pains me when I go to Bill's office and he's in a little bedroom and we're sitting at a little tiny desk and he can't have the whole board in a conference room because there is no conference room. There's so much. And, you know, as a, you know, a person that, you know, grew up in this town, graduated from the Merrimack schools, taught in Merrimack for 24 years, this is a place that I feel like Merrimack has always supported education. And I know last year it was the worst timing possible because those December tax bills came out, industrial and commercial crashed in this town, and residential is going to keep going up. It just is. And as residential goes up, people's taxes go up. I know that the New Hampshire Supreme Court is in the, you know, there's a ruling that's eventually going to come out, and I hope they come out in our favor that $4,000 whatever dollars is not enough to support public school students, and we need to get that relief, because what happens to school boards like us and building and planning committees, people like us, we get stuck because like Ken said, he's afraid the budget's going to fail, and we can't afford it to fail. But for me, like, I'm gonna put, you know, I'm gonna march on. And I think, like, hey, town of Merrimack, we're not kidding. This is what we really need. And there's a lot of concerns with these buildings. I still want to do tours. And, you know, I do think, though, that there are places, and we've talked about this, we just have not had any time. And I'm willing to do this, and I will do it over this break, but to reach out to Abigail Johnson, the CEO of Fidelity in Merrimack, one of our biggest employers, who's a billionaire who lives an hour from us, and say, hey, we would love for you to give us $1 million, because if we could start getting some other funding sources, I think, you know, people say it's $6 million. That's the number that is killing them. But if we got it to $4 million, somehow, you know, I think people would vote for it. It's just that it's $6 million, but I'm still going to stand strong and say we got to go forward.
I'm just going to say I agree with all of you, and I don't know that there's anything I can particularly add other than the need is great. It is real. I also share Ken's concerns about putting it right back on the ballot. But also, like you said, it's absolutely unsafe. It doesn't meet code. There are real issues that must be addressed, and we can't do nothing.
So what do we do if we don't have it on the ballot this year?
Well, I'm voting to put it on the ballot, but if it was me and I was going to lose this battle, which I might, I would say, again, if we could have a warrant article that would take surplus money and put it towards, you know, like we do for the capital improvement, Matt, like we have a capital improvement plan. And so we have take the money, anything that we can, and put it into a capital improvement. So, you know, so when we go to put it back on the ballot, hopefully next year, if we pull it off the ballot, which I don't know if we are or not, that would soften the blow for people. And I think that would help.
So what would that warrant article look like, Matt? What
Well,
would it need to look like
what
for
would it
that to
need
be
to look
legal?
like? Yeah, you would have a warrant article such that it's fairly standard wording. You know, to raise and appropriate the sum of, let's say, $750,000 to place into the special services central office capital reserve fund, and for original equipping, et cetera, such sum coming from the surplus from the 24-25 budget, if you wanted to do that. That means if there's no surplus, this warrant article doesn't get funded. So it gives people a level of comfort, I guess. That's the way we've always done. And name, you don't want to name the school board agents to expend. You'd want to, well, yeah, you could name the school board's agents to expend. So if in the future you pass the bond article, you could take that money right out there and put it towards the bond article and spend down your bond. I mean, the library, it's a kind of a bad example, and it's kind of a sad example, to be quite honest with you. That really, when I heard that, I was kind of shocked that they had a capital reserve account going for several years, and it was just taken away. And we have a few capital reserve accounts, but we're often criticized for not utilizing them enough. And this is a way to at least get the foot in the door and give it the added exposure of being a real possibility as opposed to just a pipe dream that's never going to happen, especially if you lay in over more than $500,000 in there.
Ken?
And I'll just say before I walk out the door, I am in favor of a capital reserve fund created and a warrant article stating that.
So I think we bring this back in January. We're not going to vote tonight on whether it's going to be on the ballot or not on the ballot, but we need to look at the warrant article in our January meeting. Give an opportunity for public comment to come because they're hearing our discussion tonight, so they have time to think about it. And that particular piece about the SAU building we can discuss in January. We're ahead of the game because we got our budget part done in December. Now we can shift to the existing warrant articles. Oh, Naomi, go ahead.
I just want to say one thing that I want people to make sure they catch is that this warrant article that we're discussing it's not raising an additional whatever amount from next year's tax bill. It's coming out of, if there is any surplus from the current
Coming from
year's.
this year's surplus, yes.
So that's already been raised and appropriated, and I assume, do you say that's zero tax impact? Or,
Well,
I know
it
there's
is-
some wiggle room there.
There's some wiggle room there because if you're not going to give that surplus back to reduce taxes, you are kind of inadvertently kind of raise taxes. But if it's already there, you're not raising it if it wasn't there.
Yeah.
So that's the good point about taking it
However,
from
my
surplus.
understanding is we've turned our surplus over to the town for the last 2 years, and it hasn't gone to reduce tax. They put it in their own.
No, the surplus that we have, it was what was it, like $3.8 million that we returned back. It goes against the school portion of the tax rate. So if you have like a $90 million budget and you have a $4 million surplus and you return that to reduce the school portion of the tax rate, you're only gonna raise $86 million. So it's not that it goes to the town and the town uses it to make their sliver of the pie even smaller and ours bigger, right? So it goes towards us.
Lori?
I was going to say, one of the things I've always been impressed is that Merrimack has a culture where it's not like they have to spend down the budget. And it's because, again, even though we look at current spending, we look at past spending, we look at spending trends, we don't hold someone to that number. So people, if, for example, something changes and a class doesn't get offered and we don't use those supplies, someone's not like, oh no, we have to use that money because we're going to lose that money. That money comes back. And that's why sometimes we have a surplus. And some towns don't have surpluses because their supply closet is so packed because they're so afraid of not spending down, And so I appreciate that Merrimack has never been like that. And that's why sometimes we do have a surplus because it's okay to have one.
We have been averaging for the past, I don't know how many years, around $2 to $3 to $4 million every single year, with the exception of the COVID years, because we couldn't hire anybody, so we had an $8 million surplus that went back to reduce taxes. And now it's coming back to normal, so the surplus we had this year is more on the normal side. And that's a good way to run a business, Do you want to run a business when you're looking at your checkbook and you're going, oh my God, one more thing that we're going to buy and we're going to be in the red every single day? This affects our bond rating, the amount of surplus we have at the end of the year, because it's an indication to all the financial institutions out there, S&P, Moody's, etc., that we can meet our obligations. So if we want to go for a bond, our bond rate is better because we have an influx of cash to meet emergencies. And our financial health, by having this surplus, also influences what happens if the town wants to go for a bond or if the MVD wants to go for a bond. Because when they fill out their paperwork to go for a bond, guess what? I have to fill out the same paperwork as if we were one entity, because in essence, we are one town, regardless of what section we're in.
So I know I've had this explained to me before, but for the benefit of anyone else that's watching, so we turn over that surplus to the town and it offsets our portion of the tax
Yes.
bill. So then people ask, well, then why don't my taxes go down? Right?
Well,
Somebody explain that?
So
Well,
it's
so-
going down. I'll do it really simple. If my
Yeah.
tax bill is $10 because that was the budget that passed, and 20% of the budget goes back into surplus, now what's going to be taken from me is only $8. So my taxes still went up that $8 because the budget passed, but instead of going up 10, it only went up 8.
and sometimes you have a
Better
little...
explained by someone else. Like, I can try to explain
Yeah.
it to people and I always seem to mess it up. So
And sometimes, and I've seen it happen a couple of times in this community over the years, you have a little issue called assessed valuation and how the spread is. We all know this past year how things shifted from commercial, industrial, retail to who? To the homeowners, the bread and butter of your community, the portion of the community that makes your town what it is. That happened all over the state, just not Merrimack.
Right.
I've seen it go the other way. I've seen condos go down tremendously and single-family homes go up. You know, I've seen the whole thing reverse. So it all depends on the valuation also. In fact, Bedford wrote, the town manager of Bedford wrote a nice letter to everybody stating such, that a lot of what you're feeling in your tax rate is a shift from commercial, industrial, to the homeowners. So, you know, this is like something that's going to happen. Maybe in the future, commercial, industrial will grow and become more valuable again. I know I see a lot of storage buildings, especially the ones on St. Gobain, which has me scratching my head a little bit. But anyway, maybe we can have a new central office in one of those. No, right?
no.
I'm sorry. I just had to say that.
No.
because-
But I will say this.
too soon, Matt. Too
Yes,
soon.
I know.
No, there
Too
will
soon.
be. They'll planning and building will have to go and check it out next week. Just why? Wait.
Yeah, no thank you.
With
That-
our radioactive suits on.
No, wait.
Go ahead, Lori, and I'll say what I was going to say when you're done.
So I, like, when we talk about the tax rate, like how much our taxes are going to go up from the school portion, I think it's also really important for people to know that we have, there's contracts that are passed that go into those formulas. So that portion that's gonna be the portion that has to be passed. And, you know, like you said, that like health insurance and all of that goes up and up and up, and that's all part of our contract. So when we look at actually how much it's going into increases, it's really it's a very small number. And we've held the line, like, you know, like all of us really felt like last year we really held a lot of lines, but you can't do that and run a really highly effective school every year. We knew that, like, you know, all right, we held the line, but now, okay, guess what? We have real needs to make sure our students, and we're very proud of the data. We're very proud of how far we've come in this school district. But we have to move forward now.
Naomi.
That actually segues really well into something I've been wanting to say about the default budget. The default budget represents stagnation. It represents doing the same thing we did last year, and that's not a formula for growth. It also represents the worst cost to benefit or value or whatever you want to call it ratio, whereas it's the most you're going to pay for getting the same thing you got last year, whereas with a relatively small increment, you can pass a budget that's slightly higher, and the value that you get from that budget is much, much greater than the actual cost that you're paying for it. So that's just some thoughts I've been having about default budgets and wanted to share.
You know, in the budget that you just put a number to, when you look at it, I mean, it's $6.80 a week. That's the increase, you know. And if you look at the default budget, that's only $1 million less, and so it's negligible almost.
Yeah, that's what I mean by that ratio. Is for a relatively small
increase,
the
you can
value
value
is much higher. Yes,
Right.
whereas if you've got the increase that you get with the default budget, your value's down here, or I can go up a tiny bit with that money and my value's up here.
Well, and sometimes with you know, when you have years and years and years and years and years, which we have of default budgets, or let's come in 30,000 below or 50,000 below default budgets, you're really not. You're just providing a level services budget. You're not really getting anywhere. So you're spending a lot of money, and you're really not gaining any traction. And sometimes it's that incremental little push that you have by going over default that'll get you such a much better end result. You know, let's take away wit and wisdom. What is that? $300,000, right? No.
Never
Don't-
say
don't-
that again.
Don't hurt me. But in the greater scheme of things, that's not that big of an ask. But the benefit
Yes.
is huge.
All those years of just being right under default got us the test scores we had.
And it got
In-
us the tax bill we have.
and the tax
because
bill,
we had to fix it all at once.
Exactly. And yet in 1 year, I'm going to say it again, homepage of the website, look at the assessment scores. Look at the fall to the spring. It is incredible what was done in changing our ELA curriculum. And, you know, our next initiative is math. But come on, in 1 year, in just a couple years of having Amy here and Bill working to fix that, we have fixed that dramatically. But it took an investment. But being at default all the time, all we're asking our teachers is to do with less, because inflation always goes up. So we're not even getting the same, we're getting less.
And our budget is a reflection not only of the hard work our new administration is doing, but also of the things that those of us that have run for school board and been elected have heard from the people who have elected us. We want to see improved test scores. And they have, last year being a notable exception, invested in making the changes by voting for the teacher contract so we can retain and, you know, highly qualified teachers and attract them. And, you know, the investment in you know, new curriculum and all of these things and iReady and like, so right, we are in a good spot as difficult as last year was, and it was difficult. That's, you know, the voters said, you know, the community said, this is where our line is. Okay, great. We know where the line is now. But we still have to move forward. And I think we're all very proud of the work that we've done, because I think we've done what the community has been asking for in multiple different ways. And we've done it well. And it's been hard at some turns. But the voters have also been very supportive of teacher contracts and the MESA contracts and the contracts, so that we can do those things, and budgets. And so, you know, last year being the anomaly and obviously the building being part of that equation, we are still trying to move forward, and we are deeply appreciative of the additions that you put in this budget that are fair, that are not outrageous, but that will move us forward because we are seeing those results.
Lori?
And I just want to say, like, a couple meetings ago, I talked about the superintendent of schools. I don't know, they did a huge research on the effects of COVID on student learning, and especially when it comes to mathematics. And when I read that most recent report, I was really passionate. Like, we have no choice, but we have to move forward with that math curriculum. We have to give those kids, we have to fill that gap. The time is running out. And so no one wants to talk about COVID-19 anymore. Like, everyone's like, we want to be done with it, but we're not going to be done with it. You know, it changed us. It changed American schools. We had kids that, you know, have huge learning gaps. And I know when I was running for school board, one of the things that I said over and over, I'm going to run on results. I'm going to run on results. I'm going to have us have results. And then, you know what? We're having results. And so, like, I'm so happy. But those results come with a lot of hard work, and also we have to fund those curriculums and those initiatives.
And those initiatives are ground up and down. They, like, I know we've had members of my circle of influence talk about, you know, well, what do administrators do? Every single thing they do touches the lives of every single student. Every decision, every meeting, every professional development is for the benefit of students. And every person in this district is doing something for students, whether they're direct instruction or direct support or indirect instruction and indirect support. It's all for the students, and that's what we've been committed to. And I appreciate a budget that, yeah, it doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. We really only cut the only thing we felt like we had room to cut. And it's, again, a wait and see kind of situation. And our teachers, retaining and attracting great teachers and great support staff was so critical to push our initiatives forward. Because the amount of work that it takes to change curriculum, learn the curriculum, train the curriculum, all of the things that happen on the back end of what happens in a classroom takes really committed faculty and staff. And so all of these things go hand in hand. And so, yes, a huge portion of the $3 million increase on the budget is our collective bargaining agreements. But they're the ones doing the work every day in the classroom. And so, of course, that needs to be a big part of the budget. So,
It's important for people to remember too that there is a collective bargaining statute. We don't have the leverage that a private sector company has in terms of either granting or not granting salary increases. We are bound by statute to collectively bargain.
all right. Enough of my soapbox. Let's move on to the warrant articles that are before us. Matt.
Okay. Yeah, on page 1, there's the preamble. I just want to note that the deliberative session is going to be on March 4th with a snow date of March 6th. And the voting is going to be on April 8th, which is the second Tuesday in April of 2025. The first one we have is our standard one to accept gifts. It just says, shall the Merrimack School Board be authorized to accept on behalf of the district without any further action by the voters, gift, legacies, and devices of personal or real property. We probably well before I got here, I made sure I went back in the old archives, 198:20B, which means you can accept cash. And once you do that, once you pass that warrant article every year, you don't have to do it again. You can just accept cash. But for this one here, to accept real property, let's say somebody wants to give us some land, right? For fields. That'd be nice. We'll take it. But without this, you can't take it. You'd have to go to the voters and have them vote on it. So this is what's very important. So this is just something that the board votes on. Budget committee does not, because it's not a money warrant article. They don't vote on articles that don't involve money. Article number 3. This is to continue on our roof project for MES and JMUs. Last year, we did roof projects on that building. I just want to report that those were finished. Now the warranties on those roofs that we did last year is 2069. So we've got, yeah, it kind of makes, Tom and I were looking at one another going, we're not going to be here, you know? And so, yeah, so we have around 3 or 4 sections that went from a warranty of 2007 to 2069. So basically what we're looking at is redoing the roofs on the, pardon me, I'm sorry, on the 97 additions, like where the gym was at MES, and then a couple of other sections towards the front of the building where the tractor doors are, where you go in the courtyard facing the police station. So we're looking at that, and so it's $823,230. If we keep going on this plan this year and the next 3 years, that's 4 years, by the 5th year, we're going to have a gap of around 10 years with no roofs needing to be done. And at that point in time, it would be beneficial to look into adding money to an already existing roof capital reserve account that was created decades ago that we drained, but we never put the money back in. So when you have that 10-year gap, that would be a recommendation to do something like that. So that's the next warrant article. That's article number 3. And then we talked about doing a capital reserve account. I'll write that up so you can take a look at it. That'll probably be article number 3, and this will be article number 4. But then article number 4, which will be article number 5, now has the budget in it with 96,823,198, and with the default budget in there at 95,808,066. So you'd have to vote on that one also.
Do you want us to do that tonight or in January?
I don't know, Bill. What do you think? You want to do the budget article? Get that?
I don't have a problem with it. There's advantages to waiting in case there's some last minute piece of information or occurrence, but there's also the benefit of cementing this right now.
I think I'd rather give the budget committee cement. That didn't come out right. I'm sorry.
Then we will take a vote. Do I have a motion to accept the warrant articles as presented with the adjustment to the budget?
I make a motion to accept it. As right.
Motion made by Lori, seconded by Naomi. All those in favor? 4-0-0. I did say 4-0. With Ken Martin excused.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
And we will again come back to the capital reserve fund budget and a decision about the SAU building in January.
Yep.
All right. With that, let's move on to the approval of minutes, December 4th, 2024. Do I have a motion to accept?
Go ahead.
Sure, I'll make a motion that we accept those.
And I'll
minutes.
second it.
Motion made by Jenna, seconded by Lori. Any discussion or changes? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye, 4-0-0. At this time, we always have public comment on agenda items only. We always invite the public to come. We'll do board member
after-
comments after,
okay.
yeah. We always invite the public to come and make comments on what we have discussed tonight. I will wait 1 minute. We don't have anybody, but generally you come to the mic, state your name and address, and as a student, you never have to say your address. With that, I'll wait 1 minute in case someone decides to come.
Someone's driving here to.
We've had that happen. Lori, you wanted to make a comment.
Yes. So I know I speak for everyone, but this budget season, just like every budget season it's a lot for everyone. And, I want to, first of all, thank the board because coming twice a week and at the busiest time of the year. But I also want to thank our administrative team because they had a lot of work to do. And they came in, the message was very clear. Our administrators did a great job in their presentation. They answered all the questions. But this team right here is exceptional. And I just really, I know that we're all passionate people. And I know sometimes, our passion comes out. But I always felt respected in my passion, and so I just want to thank them.
And I agree. I want to add that we asked a lot of hard questions this year, and I appreciate the feedback we received, the answers we received, the willingness to take those questions sometimes without defensiveness, without guarding, but just honest and open answers. So to your whole team, to all of your leaders, I say that. Well, before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I just want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. To the kids, enjoy your break. To our faculty, staff, and administrators, get some sleep. And to our parents, count the days till school opens again in January. But happy holidays to everyone. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Naomi, seconded by Lori. All those in
Seconded.
favor say aye.
Aye.
400. Thank you and good night.
There we go.